finding is the best. Let's say this is my runway here. Say we depart, we come out, on downwind, and base to final. Not the most perfect pattern, but yeah, I kind of drew it out long so you can see you wouldn't actually fly that far. So you had like the numbers, I don't know, 3-5 here. And so what I like to do is I just take off and climb, you know, best rate. I get up in the air, turn crosswind, and I'm climbing best rate until I get to this point. And then I can run my C-gumps check up here. So just do your gumps about when you hit traffic pattern altitude. So what I do at TPA is I'm maintaining, because you're going to reach TPA like on the downwind. This plane, like with 2 guys and fuel, you're going to probably hit, like some planes will hit TPA over here. I'm finding TPA about the beam this number, sometimes a little before, like in my downwind turn. So when I'm 1,000 feet above ground at altitude, I like to maintain about 70 knots. And the reason is because you have to slow right down for those flaps. Now, if you look at the POH, it says 68 knots is the never exceed speed for flaps. So I've just been living by that. So I by the time I get up on the downwind, I'm like, why would I want to accelerate to like 80 knots or whatever, just so I can slow down again? Because then you're doing janky stuff over here. So I'll maintain 70. Then when I'm abeam the numbers, this is when I start working in my first notch, and I verify I'm under 70.
68.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll just say less than 65 when I'm abeam the numbers, just to account for any little errors that might happen. So when I'm abeam the numbers, I'll do my first notch of flaps. And our airplane, it's got a momentary switch, so it doesn't like have a position. So when you flip it down, it doesn't just go halfway and then full. You have to hold it. So I like to just hold it down really hard, and it'll go to my first notch. And you can tell because there's a little gauge thing, and an orange needle will move. And so when the orange needle gets halfway to the bottom, that's what I call, you know, flaps 1. So we'll just say F1 here. And so I'm under 65. I like to shoot for, you know, 60, 65 once I pass the numbers. And I'm descending, so I'll be losing some of that altitude, but you got to be really careful not to exceed that flap speed, because when you deploy the flaps in this airplane, it has kind of a pitch down tendency.
Okay.
So you put the flaps down and the nose will kind of drop, and if you're not paying attention and really using proper airspeed control, you'll exceed the flap speed. So you gotta, at least you'll be getting close to it, so you gotta really watch that. So this is a good point to really work that power out. So I like to pull power back, and then I'm 60 to 65 knots in here. As I come into my base turn, you know, I hit the radio call, check for any traffic, base is clear, final's clear, runway is clear. And on the base turn, this is when I'm going to be 55 to 60 knots. And then I'll just say flaps 2 on the base turn. That's what's been working really well for me. So I have them do flaps 2 at this point, and then you really get a pitch down motion, because, you know, you change the way that the plane flies. So you're going to have to really add that back pressure. And this is an airplane that when you trim it all the way back, you still have to have constant back pressure. If you have full flaps in and you let go of the stick, you're nosing down into the ground. So you have to keep that back pressure the whole time if you're full flaps. If you're doing no flaps, it's going to be a little different. But when you've got full flaps, and you can have the airplane all the way trimmed back, and if you're flying 55 to 60, it still wants to drop down. And I'm finding with the flaps down, the stall speed is like 35 knots. So you're kind of well above. You could probably get even a little slower. I just like to kind of keep that speed up. So when I turn final, I'm finding an approach speed of about 55 is working great. You could get slower, I'm sure, because it does stall so slow, but I've been just approaching at 55, and that's been helping me hit like the 1,000 footers. If I have good aiming points and I come in at 55 and I'm on a stabilized approach, I've been able to hit the aiming points just about every time. But what I am finding, so you're on final, you've got full flaps, you're trimmed all the way back, and you are going to need some of that back pressure. You've got to hold a pretty constant force back on the stick. So that's the hardest thing to get used to with landing this plane. So you set your aiming point, you're coming in, you got your flaps down, all your checks are good. When you get down in the ground effect, you really need to fly this plane right down in the ground effect, because it kind of has the tendency to where you want to flare high. So get it right down in the ground effect, and then just let the airspeed just bleed off, and you'll just hold that back pressure and just very, very gently just work the back pressure and trade your pitch attitude for airspeed there, and you'll just start rounding out, and then the mains will touch. And the most important thing is to not give up on the airplane. Once the mains touch, you need to keep that back pressure, keep that nose wheel off the ground as long as you can, and then you'll just gently let the nose wheel set down, and you'll have a really smooth one. You'll grease them. But that's what's been working. Back pressure, I can't overstate how important that is on the landing rollout, and just keeping that nose wheel up as long as you can. And that's when I flew with Ken, who sold us the plane. we went and did, like an hour and a half, 2 hours of flying, and we just did tons of landings. And he was really, this is what you need to do. You need to keep the nose wheel off the ground, because this particular airplane we're flying, you need the way the nose wheel is designed is it's designed to touch down at the absolute slowest airspeed as possible. This isn't a plane you want to just slam into the ground, do slam in goes in. So yeah, just keep that nose wheel up, ride the ground effect out, kind of do a wheelie, and then just bring the nose wheel down nice and gentle, and you'll have a nice, stable, straight rollout. So, yep, that's all I've really been doing.